All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're peeling back the layers of open source intelligence, or OSINT, as we call it in the biz. We're going to see how a seemingly harmless detail, something like a simple street address, can actually be used to map out your entire physical and digital life. We're going to build this up from first principles, taking a basic property location and transforming it into a full-blown intelligence profile. But before we get totally lost in the technical weeds here, I want you to ask yourself a super simple question. How much of your personal data is just sitting out there waiting to be found? When you buy a house, when you register to vote, or heck, even when you just accept those default privacy settings on a new app, you are leaving a trail. And today, we're going to look at that exact trail through the eyes of an analyst. You'll see firsthand how all these scattered, totally separate data points connect. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to kick things off with the reconnaissance phase, then narrow it down to the physical anchor of an address. From there, we'll dive into mapping tools, cross-referencing public records, setting some firm legal boundaries, and finally, figuring out how you can actually defend against these info leaks. Let's get to it. Okay, Section 1, the OSINT reconnaissance phase. This actually lines up perfectly with the very first step in the MITRE ATTK framework for enterprise security. Now, the most crucial thing to grasp here is that OSINT relies 100% on publicly available data. We are not talking about hacking. We aren't breaking into secure databases like it's some Hollywood movie. Attackers use this totally legal, open-source data to sidestep expensive security tools without ever touching a firewall. They're literally just picking up the puzzle pieces that an organization or person has left lying around in plain sight. Looking at this, you can see the 10 reconnaissance techniques attackers use to map out their moves. It's wild, right? It ranges from active network scanning to profiling individual hosts and users. By scraping open databases and search engines, malicious actors can build a hyper-accurate target profile long before they ever make direct contact. Moving right along into Section 2, let's zoom in on a very specific type of target where our digital footprints crash right into the real world. We're talking about physical addresses. Imagine an attacker finds just one leaked email address. Well, that tiny digital breadcrumb can quickly lead them straight to a physical front door. Think of an address as a geographic anchor. It takes a purely theoretical digital target and pins them onto a literal map. But, and this is a vital first principle we absolutely have to establish right now, an address is just a property. It is not absolute proof of identity, and it definitely doesn't guarantee current occupancy. It's really just the starting block of a much larger workflow. Finding a home or work address opens a massive can of worms. It gives investigators the exact context they need to launch highly targeted social engineering attacks, or even execute physical penetration testing. But to use an address properly, you can't just Google it and call it a day. First, you have to normalize it. That means verifying the exact spelling, standardizing abbreviations, double-checking apartment numbers, and expanding zip codes. You have to search multiple variations just to make sure you've got the exact right location, making absolutely sure you aren't confusing a remote mailing address with a residential parcel before you dig any deeper. All right, so once your address is totally normalized and verified, we hit Section 3, mapping and geolocation. This is where analysts fire up advanced mapping tools to examine the physical environment in, frankly, striking detail. Let's see how we actually map a property. We usually start with a standard overhead satellite view, kind of like this one of Wrigley Field. This gives us a great baseline layout. You can see the property itself, the immediate neighborhood, nearby businesses, major roads. It's fantastic for context, but a flat image only tells part of the story. Now, when you shift to angled architectural perspectives, what we often call a bird's eye view, suddenly analysts can spot things that a flat overhead shot totally obscures. We're talking three-dimensional infrastructure, things like physical barriers, escape routes, hidden staircases, and even blind spots in video surveillance systems. You aren't just looking at a roof anymore, you're assessing a living, dynamic physical environment. And beyond your everyday map providers, real OSINT goes much further. Did you know precise GPS coordinates are sometimes hidden straight in the source code of a random web page? It's true. Plus, tools like Maplary use crowdsourced images from regular people's smartphones to reveal hidden alleys or extended driveways that official mapping cars completely miss. By checking out geospatial layers, like historic imagery or local utility layouts, investigators document concrete facts about the terrain instead of just jumping to assumptions. Which brings us to Section 4. Because an address by itself is just a building, right? But when we start cross-referencing it with public records, an incredibly accurate timeline and relationship map of our target really starts taking shape. Look at this table. Local government databases are basically gold mines of personal data. By querying GIS portals, property tax records, or the Register of Deeds, you start linking specific people, nonprofits, and businesses right back to that geographic anchor. Heck, even historic renovation permits or meeting minutes from the local zoning board can reveal a property's hidden past. It really highlights just how much of our personal lives are a matter of permanent public record. And this is where true OSINT shines: cross-referencing. You take your beautifully verified address and run it through business registrations, historical news archives, and court opinions. A single data point on its own? Totally harmless. But when you combine property records with whois domain registrations and historical data, you build a rock-solid chronological timeline. You create this web of relationships linking that exact location to actual events and real organizations. But hey, a quick word of caution here. Not all data is created equal, so we always have to assign confidence levels. Honestly, people's search engines are notoriously awful, full of outdated or just plain wrong information. Relying on one single directory is a total rookie mistake. But if you source that same address independently from a county tax database, boom, your confidence level skyrockets. Always document your intelligence gaps and write down your exact search methodology so you can properly corroborate your findings. Now for Section 5. With all this crazy power to gather intelligence, we absolutely must adhere to legal guardrails and methodological integrity. Look, there is a very hard line between compliant OSINT and straight-up cybercrime. Legal OSINT relies completely on publicly available data and strict compliance with privacy laws like GDPR. Hacking, breaching systems, or using fake deceptive aliases to gain access, absolutely off-limits. Doing that completely destroys the integrity of an investigation. Proper ethical reporting requires staying firmly within these boundaries.
On top of that, ethical reporting means admitting what we don't know. A massive pitfall in OSINT is confusing correlation with causality. So for example, just because an IP address geolocates to a certain town, that doesn't mean a specific resident at that address actually did anything. IP addresses give us regional proximity, not a pinpoint physical identity. Jumping to conclusions here can, and will, falsely accuse innocent people. All right, final section, Section 6. How do we take everything we just learned about the attacker's perspective and use it to become better defenders for our organizations and ourselves?
First up, organizations have to get proactive. You need specific technical controls to detect this exact type of reconnaissance. That means configuring your SIM systems to flag unusual intranet scanning, strictly enforcing multi-factor authentication everywhere, and constantly auditing what infrastructure data you're accidentally leaving exposed to the public web. But listen, the best firewalls in the world can't patch human nature. The human element is almost always the weakest link. We have to train employees to realize that highly targeted phishing attempts are usually crafted using the exact open source property and historical data we've been talking about today. Basically, whatever you share online literally becomes the ammunition for the attack. So I want to leave you with a thought. Considering the absolute permanence of public records and how easily these databases can be cross-referenced, how secure is your own digital footprint really? Today, we've walked through the entire workflow together, normalizing a raw address, verifying it, mapping it, building a timeline, and ethically corroborating the data. Understanding this from the attacker's point of view is your very first step in defending against it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and stay tuned for our next lesson.